here is our birth story. So I go in for a non-stress test on the 8th, which is a Thursday, and I'm not supposed to be induced until Monday the 19th. So she's already had a non-stress test. She passed with flying colors, so I was not worried about this. But I go in and her heart rate had dipped a couple of times. So the nurse who was doing the test seemed a little concerned and said, I'm just going to send your doctor a message, the doctor who would be delivering my baby. And then a few minutes later, she looks at me and says, your doctor wants you to stay here. And I'm like, so many thoughts go running through my head. And I'm like, forever till my induction date, like what? And she taught us to say how like ripening the cervix, and it's a whole process and it could take days, and it could be a very long process. Well, this was not my situation. She looked at me and my husband and probably saw that we were overwhelmed and said, do you need a minute? And I said, a minute would be nice. She left and I just started crying. I'm like so overwhelmed. Luckily, I had most of my hospital stuff already packed in my car, but I did have my dog in my car. So I was thinking this was going to be like a quick 20-minute test. We'd be in and out. I almost didn't even do the test just because I was due for induction like in 11 days. So I'm glad I did go to the non-stress test. Anyways, my husband jumps on the phone and he tries to get his sister to come pick up our dog and to bring us a couple more things that we might need. So it's 9 in the morning and I ate something that morning, but they asked me to fast. So it is now the next day at 9 o'clock in the morning. I've been fasting for 24 hours. And because I had been fasting, it made me think that they were leaning more towards a C-section. At one point, there were like 5 or 6 nurses in there. They all had caps on. I'm just like overwhelmed, wondering what is happening. It turns out her heart rate had dipped and they all had rushed in to give me an emergency C-section. So an emergency C-section is something that I wanted to stay far away from because I did not want to be under just because it's scary, but also I want to be, coherent, like awake for the birth of my baby. So the doctor has come in around 9:30 the next day and he says, because you have the Valmenis cord and because baby is so small, he was worried that she would crash if I tried to do vaginal delivery. So of course I said, we got to do what we got to do. This was definitely not the, plan or vision that I had in mind, but you just got to be adaptable. So he comes in and says, I'm always leaning towards vaginal delivery, but in this case, I'm encouraging you to do a C-section just because he didn't want her to crash, and I did not want an emergency C-section. So with that being said, he said, I know the operation or the operating room is already set up for you just in case because of the scare earlier. And the night before, I had the sweetest nurse and she looked at me and said, I think you're going to meet your baby girl tomorrow. And I'm like, oh my gosh, really? And I was like vaginal or C-section? And she said C-section. And I was like, whew, I took a deep breath and I said, okay. And, her next shift, she came back and just came and to meet the baby, but she was so sweet. Anyways, back to it. It is now 9 o'clock. He said, I'm going to go talk to them and see if we can do your C-section around noon. So I'm like hyperventilating, trying to catch my breath. And he looks at his clock. It's around 9:30. And he says, let's see if we can do it now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Like, I'd rather just do it now and get it over with anyways than just sitting here like stressed the whole time. So minutes pass and they come in and give me the gown to put on and give the scrubs to my husband. So before you know it, we are dressed. They pushed me off into the operation room, give me an epidural. My husband couldn't be in there for the epidural for some reason. So he came in right after. When he came in, I could see that he was like just as overwhelmed as I was. He put a headphone in my ear and Dirty Heads, my favorite band, was playing. They've got me through like the hardest times. So shout out Dirty Heads. And I just remember like cheering her on, being like, "You got this! Like, we're made for this!" Like saying her name and just really rooting for her, just wanting the best of the situation. And 15 minutes later, he says, "Do you want to see your baby?" And I'm like, "Yes." So he holds her up, behind the plastic skirt, like plastic tarp thing, and it was such like a surreal moment, but it went so fast, and we got to do a little skin on skin, and before you know it, I'm stitched up, and they pushed me off into a room to recover for like 30 minutes, just to make sure I'm getting like feeling back and stuff like that. But I was numb for a really long time, which was kind of scary. She went to NICU just to make sure her vitals and everything looked good. So my husband went with her for that. She looked great. She was 4 pounds and 10 ounces, tiny but thriving. Um, so I think perspective is everything, because I did not plan on having a C-section, and I planned on having like these lights and sounds and just having a vision. And I'm just grateful that I was open to adapting, because it definitely did not go the way that I wanted. But at the end of the day, my baby girl was here. We were happy. We were healthy. We were thriving. So whether you hear like good or bad birth stories, just be open to adapting and know that everyone's, birth story is going to look different. It's going to feel different. And, you know, just be open minded and just know at the end of the day, you are going to meet your precious baby. And that's all that matters. Thanks for listening to my birth story. And let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts on being open minded and just being adaptive when it comes to your birth delivery.